Okay, welcome everyone to this webinar that we jointly organized as Seedlink with PwC. And the topic of today, although I know that everyone is, working through COVID-19, we're actually already focusing on how we're adjusting and how you are adjusting, all of you that are participating, to this, what we call the new normal. And we started this series of webinars because we thought we have a very close community of executives and CHROs and HRDs around the globe, whether we speak about Brazil, China, Europe. So we thought, how can we best, in this time, share information, share learnings amongst a group of people that are very close to us. So this is the third webinar that we're organizing. Last week we had one with the community in Brazil, and before that actually with Europe and China. And this one focuses, as we said, on how we're adjusting to the new normal. We like to discuss a couple of questions with the lovely panel that we have with us today. So let me introduce them to you. We have with us Professor Gert-Jan Hofstede, or Gert-Jan, who is a professor of artificial sociality at Wageningen University. And we're also very proud that he sits in our scientific board at Seedlink, so has been very helpful with the development of our technology over the past years. We have also with us a partner from PwC, Nicolien Borggreve. So she heads the personnel and organization and is a partner at PwC. So she will help us to understand what kind of instruments we have to actually guide us through this crisis and share her learnings with us. And then we also have two board members of Ahold Delhaize with us. Let me start with Abbe Luersman, who is the CHRO. So very happy to have you, Abbe. And with her, her colleague Farhan Siddiqi, who is leading as a Chief Digital Officer, the digital transformation of Ahold Delhaize. So very happy to have you all. Rutger Lamant-Grip is with us. He will actually steer you through this webinar with all kinds of intelligence questions, and also my dear colleague Rob de Haas, who will help us with the Q&A. So please also share your questions in the Q&A, and we will make sure that we also answer them. So let me hand over to Rutger to actually get started. So please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Rina. Great to have you all on board. Thanks for joining, panelists. Thanks for joining, viewers. Let me see, we'll get started with the first question. But before we do, by the way, viewers, you are welcome to ask your questions in the Q&A chat room, where Rob will monitor the questions coming in, and he will select the ones that are very relevant in the moment, and he will choose which ones to keep for the end, because at the end we will have some time reserved for questions from the audience before we dive into the main takeaways and conclusions of this webinar. So the first question I'd like to direct towards Farhan. So Farhan, what is the biggest challenge you are facing amid COVID-19? And yeah, maybe what's keeping you up at night, Farhan?
Yeah, thank you, Rutger. So let me give a little bit of context, because that's important. If you think about it, different companies are facing different challenges. Some of them face existential crisis, so you have to really reinvent yourself or figure out, okay, how are you going to basically even sustain? We are fortunate because Ahold Delhaize is in the business of food retail. So we're mostly operate grocery stores in almost 10 countries. We have about 20 brands. Fortunately, we're in the business which becomes very, very essential, and we're allowed to stay open because it serves a very basic need in humans right now. So what we saw was quite opposite of what a lot of the other industries face. So our demand basically spiked big time. Initially, when these lockdowns happened, you saw a lot of panic buying and stockpiling of essentials. And it did not only happen in the traditional stores, but we also saw was a big demand because of the lockdowns and complexities of e-commerce growth. Now, traditionally, which is very important, is e-commerce was very hard to do, even though we had a very good strategy. For years, we've been actually moving toward digital transformation. E-commerce has been part of our transformation agenda. It's a very difficult business in traditional food retail, which is a low margin business because of the added cost. So, and if you looked at everything around us, most of the projections thought that, okay, e-commerce penetration as part of omnichannel commerce and food retail is going to taper out at like high single digits or 10% not too long ago, 3 months ago, because, okay, it's not economically viable, and people were really looking at mature markets like the UK where it tapered off. Within weeks, that whole thing has been blown away because it's not a demand problem anymore. There's so much pent-up demand that now the projections are double for most of our mature markets that we expect, okay, it could reach up to 20%. That changes the entire dynamic of our business model, okay? So in short, the positive side is we had a pretty robust digital strategy, which is focused on a transformation of the business, not just e-commerce. It is about, okay, digitizing all aspects of the business and modernizing them, even including what Abbe will talk about, of thinking about the workforce of the future, the talent, the culture, and how we operate. And we'll connect the dots back, like how we're operating right now. This has been very much part of our vision. The speed it is happening as is unprecedented. So the interesting part is, like, we have the problem where everything we were hoping to transform has accelerated overnight. So our challenge is, how do you make that happen, right? So you have a role to serve against our purpose, which is like eat well, save time, live better. It couldn't be more relevant than right now what's happening, because there's a bigger purpose that we need to serve what humanity is going through right now. So the big challenge, if I were to come back to, is great that everything that we've been talking about gets accelerated. It's a crisis. It needs to happen. Mm-hmm. Maybe there's a reprioritization of things we will do. Some will accelerate more than the other. So we have to continuously do that analysis. The big challenge is, if we were not moving fast enough before, and now you need to move even faster with all the constraints we're dealing with, like how do you bring in the right talent? Okay, how do you do it fast enough at unprecedented speed to be able to meet the demand of the market and the customer? How do we do that? So I think that's my big challenge that I keep thinking about. Then of course we'll get to the other ones. If you talk about what keeps you up at night from a business perspective, that's the big one. Like, hey, how do you capitalize on this opportunity to accelerate and drive with constraints? I think team, and how do you keep teams engaged and morale high? I think we're gonna get to that later in this. I think that's very top of mind. And the biggest one, I think, is like the societal impact that this is having. Okay, what's it doing to people's health, economic aspects, and overall long-term mental health? Those are all the things that do keep me up at night.
Yeah, I can really imagine. It's a strange situation we're in. Abbe, do you maybe have something to add to Farhan's remarks?
Yeah, thanks a bunch, Rutger. I mean, really on the last one there around the role in society, one of, I think, the things that keep me up at night is how do we make sure we keep our associates and customers healthy and safe? And it's really one of our greatest calls to action. And we take heart our responsibility during this time of need. And thus, this is also what really keeps me up at night and keeps our board up at night. And we pay attention and monitor the latest on the Global World Health Organization and the CDC and ECDC global monitors. But as well, we do things with our own Ahold Delhaize case monitor, and we have brand dashboards for all of our great local brands where we kind of track the impact of the virus. And we want to make sure that we're always ensuring we're taking the right additional actions real time where needed, align with the ever-changing state and country government requirements, and actions ensuring things like the right protective measures. And you've heard a lot about masks, gloves, plexiglass, safety vests, reminding of social distancing, or enhanced hygienic practices, or as well preventative measures like modified store hours or shifts, backup and rotating teams, store DC flow, cart trolley cleaning, making sure all those things are in place, but also looking at things like refreshing benefit policies for all associates and work from home policies or tools and tips for our headquarters and support office associates, ensuring things like sick pay coverage for associates that unfortunately are affected by the coronavirus, or even things like an employee assistance program or e-coaching to make sure we're not only taking care of our associates with mental and psychological support, but also providing that for their families. And so Farhan and I are really proud that we're able to start to do those kind of things relative to this pandemic that's happened, but clearly it's something that keeps us up at night because we need to be ready for every potential, hazard that's out there, and how do we make sure we keep our associates and our customers healthy and safe?
Yeah. Thanks for those thoughts, Abbe. Moving on to the next question, I'd like to ask Nicolien to dive in on that a bit in detail. So, Nicolien, what insights could you share to help people get through this crisis and ensure their business continuity?
Thanks, Rutger. And I think, Farhan and Abbe already shared a lot based on their practice. So that's always great to hear from companies themselves. When you're managing a company active also in Europe, you will see that we have all different rules and regulations in each country and all the different government measures. Like in Sweden, you can still go out for dinner. In the Netherlands, parents especially, are very happy because the schools are opening again on the 11th of May. So I see Rina smiling in the background, and many of our colleagues. And in France, you still need to show proof to the police if you go outside to buy bread. So that's very different. And also, of course, for an HR director or someone managing a company, it's complicated to navigate through. So we get a lot of questions from all our clients. What is expected from me as an employer in all the different countries? What are the policies I need to have in place? What about the payment of the wages of my employees, of my permanent people working from home? Can they work from home? Do they have laptops? During sickness, during taking care of others, of sick parents or children, or how do I deal with freelancers and agency workers and agents and my flexible workforce? So all those questions. And then also, of course, do you have insight in who the teams and individuals are in your organization on whom the critical processes or services depend? And if they fall ill, do you have any workers with the right skills who can step in those critical roles if needed? And of course, also, do you know exactly where your staff is? We see now in some countries in Europe that people are getting a bit tired of all the rules and tend to take some more liberty to move. So are you sure that you know where they are? Also, when we're moving towards the new normal, how do you keep track of your people? And of course, how do you communicate with them and keep them safe and informed and engaged? And depending on in what state you are as a company, Farhan was referring to it already, we have many clients in the survival mode, so really panicking in the past few weeks. Some of you may, well, hopefully not, but may recognize the situation. You need to take you need to apply for all the different governmental measures that are there in the different countries. So whether it's compensation of wages, like in the Netherlands, or the temporary redundancies in the UK, the working conditions regulations in Germany. And if you applied for that, probably you did already, but is that enough? And do you need to do more? And should you take any other actions? And have you considered alternative measures to save costs if you need to lower your costs? So postponing payments or stopping payments, maybe you can do something with bonuses, or what can you require from your employees? Because it is in the end a two-way street for all of us. We need to survive this together. So what can you ask from your people, and do you need the labor relations for that? If you need to involve labor relations, many of you will know in Europe that can be very lengthy and very hard processes. So will it help you in the end? Because if you reach agreement on maybe a cut in wages in 6 months' time, by that time your people may be disengaged and you need them now, when hopefully things are picking up again. So is that the right decision to make? So those are all things that our clients are struggling with now. And also now, of course, how will this affect us in the long run, and how will we survive this crisis maybe in a better shape, and how to create a new normal considering individual health, but also economic health.
Yeah.
Nicolien, can I ask a follow-up question? Because you mentioned a couple of measures, and it might be that some of the attendees are actually in a state where you are in survival mode, which might be different than Ahold Delhaize.
Yeah.
What would you reckon if you look at the clients that you service? What are the top 3 instruments or actions that they're taking internally, like measures that are taking beyond governmental support to actually guide the companies through this challenging time? If you had to give a top 3, what would that be?
Yeah, if you look at the survival mode, then it's indeed the governmental measures you talked about, the short-term finding cash, so postponement of payments, stopping payments. So I think those 2 are the most important ones. And the companies in a better shape, they're really looking into how do I keep my people safe and engaged, because it's so hard to have your people working with all the little children running around, or people working completely alone for 5 weeks in a row, or maybe even longer, feeling lonely, feeling maybe not really seen. You know, my manager is not really, seeing me on a day-to-day basis. Do they know what I do? So it's also about keeping your people engaged. I think that's what keeps them awake the most at this time.
Thank you.
And Nicolien, another question to respond. I understood that I heard the term right-sizing your company from you, I think, for the first time. Can you elaborate a bit more on that?
Yeah, that's if the governmental measures are not enough for you, or maybe you do not qualify for them. What do you then do to right-size your company in a smart way? So what I said, maybe if it's possible, get out of this crisis in a better shape than you entered it. You can just go for the redundancy plan, but do that in a smart way. Is there a possibility, depending on the local rules in the various countries, that you can keep your talents, that you can keep certain people that are fit for the future? Maybe you need to upskill people, or maybe you can get rid of certain compensation and benefits nobody cared about before. So that's really, what we're talking about then.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Nicolien. So moving on to the next question, I'd like to ask you, Abbe. So team morale, we already heard Farhan about it a bit. Nicolien mentioned it. What are you doing on this area?
Yeah, well, I mean, both as Farhan and Nicolien noted, we're all having to adapt and work in very different ways. And I think we can all say that it's been an unbelievable journey and even an incredible learning curve for each of us. And relative to how we're keeping up morale, we continue to reinforce our purpose and leadership responsibility as being fortunate to be part of the defined vital sector and providing needed products and services to our customers and the communities we serve. We keep our associates and teams informed, as I noted earlier, of ever-changing local, state, and country government requirements and restrictions and the status of our own Ahold Delhaize organization and our brands. We also are reinforcing the meaning in the work they do and the difference all 380,000 associates make to the customers we serve and communities we're a part. We've accelerated clearly the use of technology so our associates and teams can stay informed and connected. Some examples of this are regularly connecting virtually via Microsoft Teams, both for individual sessions, but as well team sessions, joining and hosting more internal pod and webcasts than we ever did before, even participating in virtual coffee lunch breaks or walking meetings or an occasional bike ride with headsets, or a game of virtual Pictionary for a quick break to build resilience. And also kind of reinforce the connection and community outside of just getting the job done. And we've adjusted benefits and work policies where needed to accommodate the changing needs of our associates and also appropriately recognize the role they're playing in the work they're doing, and conducting regular pulsing of our teams and the organization to ensure everyone's needs are met and actions are taken to adjust where needed, because things are constantly changing. So we want to continue to do these pulses to make sure we're keeping up morale where we need to have it to best serve the customers and the communities we're a part.
And Gert-Jan, professor, if you hear those remarks from Abbe. What are you thinking? Is she doing the right things?
Yes, she is. I think she is. This is what you would expect from a, let's say, upbeat, positive-minded US leader in a place such as this company. Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
and you mentioned the pulsing your employees, getting a good feel of how they're doing. I understand that Rina has also been working on a new product in this area. Rina, maybe you can share a bit more about what you've been doing with Seedlink in this area.
Yeah, thank you. I think when COVID-19 hit us, and we are also having a large team in China, so we were actually already confronted with this a bit earlier than here in Europe. I think when I started talking about this, most people actually laughed at me and thought, this is like SARS, it will not come to Europe. Well, it did. But at that time, you know, when we got hit, as you know, we're working on technology that can abstract information from natural language. So we can actually run sentiment analysis throughout communication, understanding how people are actually truly feeling. Because one of the things that I asked myself as a leader of this company was, am I actually asking the right questions? Am I not missing something? And in weekly meetings, it's always the same people who speak up or speak out, and people that stay silent. How are you actually knowing how they're doing? So we thought, how can we leverage our technology? It just really started as something that we used ourselves. So we ran weekly pulse surveys with, let's say, simple closed-ended questions, which every pulse survey does, but also open questions to actually read from the natural language, from the answers that people gave, how they're actually doing. And that was kind of a conversation opener for the weekly team meetings that we had. And so that opened up a whole new conversation with our teams. And it looks a little bit like this. So, you know, you get an overall team sentiment per week, knowing how people are doing, how they're feeling, how their families are doing. I don't know if you can see this.
Just a sec, Rina, because I think you can show some things. Give me a second. And then can you share your screen? Yeah, here we go. I think the audience is seeing it now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so basically we get information about how our teams are doing, what their physical state is, what their family emotional state is. We can actually understand what is top of mind in terms of the positive things and the negative things that happen based on the answers that they're giving, which is often a great conversation starter. And we pulse this on a weekly basis, so we can actually see how the teams and our teams are doing over time, and who we should pay more or less attention to. And then we also look at inconsistencies in terms of what people answer to open questions versus closed questions. And those outliers, you actually want to, you need to make sure that you really pay attention to the team and the team members. And we can also look at more on an aggregated level how your team is comparing to other teams out there. And so knowing how your team is doing and compare to our benchmarks. And so it all started as something that we did for our teams, and we made it available for everyone to use it.
Great. Thanks for that great example, Rina. I'm curious, Nicolien, do you recognize tools or things like this with your clients now?
Yeah, absolutely. You can indeed see, that people are speeding up their digital way of working because of this crisis. So maybe that's one of the few good things that come out of it. If you can speak about that they're really, working with those tools to stay connected with their people.
Okay, great. Oh, let me see. I think there's a question coming in. Let me see, Robbie. Let me get you in the screen. Yeah, Rob, you can already start explaining, please.
Perfect. Thank you. We got some questions in. I think it's good to ask them to the entire panel, but if somebody knows the direct answer. So we're talking about morale here, right? And you are the leaders of your teams and your companies. How do you make sure that you keep up your own morale? And are you really active dealing with that?
Who'd like to take this one?
Well, I actually got a very nice tip from Abbe during this seminar. You know, being a Dutchie and then hearing about bike rides with the team with headsets, that's really something I will try with my team. Yeah, and apart from that, I try to, and I'm lucky being in the Netherlands, I try to go outdoors early in the morning to see some nature and be outside. But that's a personal note, I think.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Well, I'm just a teacher in my professional role, so I don't have a team in a company. But teaching a class of 60 people online, or having PhD students that are isolated, they're away from their homes in Kenya or Indonesia, and they're in a Dutch apartment, is also quite hard. So I think the realization that the mood of the leader is contagious to those that are being led is a very important one. So I try to do that. If I have to worry, I won't do it in front of the others, but also I'm not really so very worried, so that helps.
Okay, thanks.
And I'll admit that, okay, there are times you oscillate between Zen and total anxiety. But I think managing that is really, really important. And I think the biggest thing that works for me is really keeping things in perspective. Focus on the positive side. Okay, like what's going on in the world, how many people are dying, and how the impact's going to be, and what our problems if we're going to complain about social isolation and working from home. Just put that in context. It's really minuscule. It's super first world problems we're going to complain about. So I think always having that lens on really helps.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Farhan. Let's move on to the next topic. And I'd like to direct this one to our professor. Let me get you on screen here, Professor. So what do team members from different cultures expect from their leadership?
Right. I could talk for days about this and never say the same thing twice. But let's keep it short. First, of course, these are special times, and we've already heard it from you other guys who told us things about the teams you lead. Everybody is maybe oscillating between Zen and utter panic. Huh? There is more anxiety in the air than normally. And people can do three things then. They can be Zen, which means nothing's the matter. They can be anxious, or they can be in between. Something is the matter. I know something is the matter. I need to place it in context. I need to be vigilant. So that is the proper attitude in between. For a leader, this means that the people in your team are likely to want to be led. You have to be there. You have to be there more obviously than you might otherwise have to be. And if there's no leader, then people could panic. They could go into the panic. They might start to burn 5G installations, as people are doing in the Netherlands, because they think that it spreads COVID-19. On the other hand, most people like to be led. Every week, our Prime Minister gives a speech on TV, as it happens in many countries. Everybody's watching, almost. Everybody likes it. So for you guys in companies too, you have to know, okay, what are they expecting from me? You have to know better than in ordinary times, what actually is my team? What do they expect? What don't they expect? And you have to give them that. So don't let your own anxiety rule the day, but the expectation of your team members. So this is the general thing. Secondly, a team means something else everywhere in the world. And it's not because we have a set, let's say, mainly Anglo-inspired companies that are at the table now and populate a lot of the world, that necessarily teams in all the national branches of those companies work in the same way. And most people who work in the companies, they know that. You have lots of boundary spanners in your company. They know that in Kenya, in Indonesia, in Romania, in Spain, in France, everywhere it's a little bit different. So if you have a homogeneous team from one country, you just need a leader who understands that country. If you have a heterogeneous team from many countries, it becomes even more complicated. And there's more that relies on the charisma and the fingertips and the antennae of the leader. This also means, and this is the third point I would say, that you cannot be sure that your team members, if you're the leader, think the same thing about your team. I will give you one anecdote. This is from Philadelphia, where there were many young, clever Ethiopians in managing parking lots 5 or 6 years ago or so. And one of them was so good that the US citizen of Danish ascent that I spoke to promised to give him a leading job in one of the parking lots. And then he told this WASP American, sorry, but I can't do it. Why can you not do it? Well, because my family has an obligation to the family of such and such a person who would then be below him. So the family obligation, and I'm sure in Pakistan you could have similar things, between people on the other side of the world impacts which jobs you can give, which leadership roles you can give in Philadelphia. These things can happen. So there are invisible links in the minds of peoples. And if you don't know them as a leader, especially in times of stress, you might go wrong. So these three levels are all important. We are all the same. We are all under more stress than normally. A team is a different thing in every country in the world. And a team might not be the same thing to the members that you lead in your team. I'm not making it easier, am I?
Well, no, but yeah, I think we're getting steps ahead, Professor. So in the different companies and countries around the world, there's different cultures, and I believe what you're saying is that every culture needs a different style of leadership in crisis. Is that correct? And can you elaborate on that?
Well, let's talk about sleep. Everybody needs sleep, okay? All people in the world, many animals, but not the same way, not the same time, not the same amount. So we all need leadership. Everybody needs it, but not exactly in the same way. And if you don't know all these theories about culture and you just give it the best you can in an honest way, then that will probably be satisfactory to most of the teams of the people that you are leading. These people also know, if they're from a different place than you are, that you are from a different place. So they expect that. Especially in a time of crisis, I think also that honesty and true commitment and qualities like that are going to be more important. They reduce this anxiety and the stress in the people who are being led. So yes, it has to be different in different parts of the world for sure. And if I have a day, I will explain to you exactly how. But if you don't have a day and you have a crisis and you have a team to lead, then there are also some generic pieces of advice.
Yeah. And Abbe, listening to Professor lecture about this topic, I'm curious to hear how are you adjusting in your leadership style for all the different cultures that you are definitely covering as a leader?
Yeah, well, I think Gert-Jan is right on point, because as a leader, you have to be there and you have to be available when your team and when individuals need you. And actually, I'd go as far as it's not just the different countries or the different cultures, but even the individual team members that can be from the same culture may have very different needs. And we need to be able to fully adapt ourselves. We need to first understand those needs and to be able to adapt how we interact with the individuals on our teams and across the respective organizations.
Yeah,
quite so. So I haven't been talking about individuals, but of course, no two people are the same.
Absolutely.
It's not because you're both from the same country that you are the same.
Yeah.
Gert-Jan, I have a question. I was forwarded this article from Forbes that had the header or headline, "What do countries with the best coronavirus responses have in common?" And what do you think the answer was?
Yeah, well, I saw that article. In the beginning of the crisis, actually, the countries that did best all have long-term oriented cultures. That struck me. It doesn't mean that they will necessarily remain the best, because if you repress it very strongly, you get no resistance. But those countries all had women in leadership. They had female leaders.
That's that of course that there needs to be a reaction from you now, Rina.
No, that's true. No, I was wondering why was that? Because I cannot imagine it's only because of female leaders. But was it something else in terms of the culture? Or the...
Oh, well, I saw those countries, and it struck my eye that most of them were on the extreme scale of one of the dimensions of culture, which is the tendency to fight things out, masculinity, versus the tendency to talk things over, femininity. And so that also leads to very different political arenas. But, you know, this is also a historical coincidence. And one of them was Angela Merkel. Now, Germany is by no means a culturally feminine country, but I think too that this idea of when a crisis strikes, you want security has helped Angela Merkel become again what she's been for a long time, which is an uncontested leader. She's very calm and collected. People are happy, probably in Germany now, to have her. So I like the article very much, and I think you know, it's thought-provoking, and it's also probably there is some truth in it, that these female leaders are less likely to go into the either the defensive avoidance, it's a hoax, it'll go away, it doesn't touch me because I train, that kind of stuff that some leaders have done, or on the other side, the hypervigilance. Let's give you 7 years in cell if you break the rule. So women are more likely to stay in the middle, which is the vigilance, which is open your eyes, see what's happening, and respond accordingly. And it could also be that people are more likely to accept that from a woman. I'm not sure.
And Farhan, I see you smiling. What are you thinking? Do you recognize this?
Yeah, a number of thoughts. First of all, I think we're even the term like new normal, and we know what is working well. I think it's too premature to draw any conclusions. We're too early in this cycle, right? I think we have to unlearn that really quickly because we don't know, right, what's successful. Second thing, I think that that's a very interesting article and perspective. But then why I was smiling and laughing was when you said, okay, to talk things over and versus doing. I mean, we have a president that I won't name who does talk a lot. That doesn't mean really that, okay, we'll come up with the same result.
Well, I would call that fighting with words, not talking. He's never listening.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's move on to the next question. Let me see. Yeah, Farhan, that one's also initially for you as Chief Digital. So what investments are you making right now to adjust to this so-called new normal? And are there interesting learnings there to share with the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, again, like reiterate, I don't think we know a new normal. We have to think in terms of scenarios and prepare for probably the worst and hope for the best. But okay, example of how we're approaching it is we're stepping back and looking at, okay, how the virus behaves, how the institution respond, like the government, and okay, what restrictions they put, what impact that might have, what decisions we need to take in as an organization, and what that results in our customer, our partners, and ecosystems, right? What are the first, second degree impacts of that? And if you kind of look in these different dimensions, you will probably come up with like 5 or 6 scenarios, and you look at, okay, what are the most likely? Example would be, hey, short-term, bad memory goes away. We probably all know it's not going to happen. Could it be a seasonal flu, and what impacts that? Okay, it comes back in the fall, like that's the rhetoric, okay, last couple of days. Scenarios might be different, okay, how each of these bodies react. or it's a long-term sustained thing, and this is not the only pandemic we deal with. This could actually happen with another pandemic, right? So between these modeling, you can come up with 4 or 5 scenarios, and each of those you go back and look at your strategy and look at what do you need to accelerate and what do you need to decelerate that will basically react to that, and you have an idea. But again, be dynamic. You're not creating 3-year plans and locking them down. How do you be dynamic? Now, when we approach it that way systematically, the good part is what we're seeing is like we were already on a good path of transformation, and things that became really obvious because how the market and the customer reacted. For example, e-commerce is an obvious one, right? If it is taken on fire, we're not constrained by demand, we're constrained by capacity and capability and a supply chain. So we need to fix those. How do we fix that and start catering to the customer? So there are obviously going to be investments in accelerating e-commerce, both in the US and EU. Good part was already part of the agenda, but now we're making decisions a lot faster. We've opened our eyes to new business models within them and looking at it differently versus looking at, okay, I'm going to lose money. Example is now you don't see it as a channel cannibalization. You don't see that, okay, what is just an e-commerce spend and I lose money on that. You can look at the total customer spend across all your channels. And if new customers are coming into you, how can you convert them to omni-channel customers? When you changes those lens, your investment appetite totally changes. So that is very, very encouraging. Of course, to do this, e-commerce is an obvious one, but we need to invest in capabilities. So this is going to be, technology, people, right? Very important. Data and analytics has been called out. I think will accelerate basically that investment because that powers the entire transformation of the business model. You guys, Seedling will, be happy to see being in the AI space that we think that's going to play a very important role, and we're going to accelerate our capabilities in that space. Other interesting thing is what you will see is some of the things that we were experimenting with, which were pretty far out. Think of it like a autonomous store, which has all number of technologies in play. It is not practical to get there right now with the cost and the scale we operate at. But we might be able to take some of those capabilities within that and apply them quickly, right? Okay, if you think about when this slowly opens up, there'll still be restrictions of how many people can be in a store at a time. So can we use some of these vision technologies or infrared sensors to be able to detect how many people are there without invading privacy and make it available for customers to say, okay, what's the right time for you to go to a store? You can see the same technologies being applied to transportation, okay, for NS, that, okay, you have scheduling systems now that are based on data and analytics that's real time. And I think underneath it all, we will take a very fresh look at some new business models that have, would have not been viable in the past based on these constraints. Do we really look at some new business opportunities that we'll probably invest in quickly on?
And Farhan, maybe a more generic question on what technology and digital can do for us in this time, because there's talks about apps and other tools becoming available for the public to measure also the virus, how fast it's spreading, how fast we need to act. You as a visionary in this area, are you confident about how technology can help us get out of this crisis?
I think technology is not going to be the only reason that will get us help out of it. Again, it's depending on how you use technology, and if you use it effectively, it'll enable the right cause. But I don't think you always start with technology. The big mistake we make is like we think about, okay, here's the technology, what can we do with it? Start with the problem we're trying to solve, whether it's a customer need or a business problem, and work backwards and then figure out, okay, what technology will help you answer that question. That is very, very fundamental in this space. But there's going to be a lot of hype and a lot of noise, right? And just like in this space, there has been for the last 10, 15 years, there's a lot of noise. You got to filter through that and get to the right problem you're trying to solve. And I think it'll be a big enabler.
Yeah. Interesting. And Nicolien, I understand that PwC is also helping companies shape the workforce of tomorrow. That obviously has to do with digital as well. What initiatives are you taking or are your clients taking in this area?
Yeah, that all relates to the upskilling of your people, right? To ensure that what I said before, that you get out of the crisis in a better shape than you entered it. So taking this time as an opportunity to upskill your people, sometimes if they just don't have enough work right now, and then you can upskill them for the future, or you look for the smart right sizing of your company, seeing if you have the right people and the right skills in your company already, and if not, upskill them.
And is it realistic to work on upskilling or reskilling your people in this crisis mode where people are having trouble enough to handle their normal workload?
Yeah, and that's why I can absolutely relate to Farhan's comment on that. So first look at the problem you want to solve and then look for the solution. So it should not be a thing in itself, so to say, because indeed I see right now, we see a lot of clients still in this more or less mode, like we're in the survival mode and we want to look for money. We need to stay alive, basically. So they're not there yet, but other companies in a better shape, they are. So it really depends per company. Okay.
There's a question.
And we have many digital officers in the company that can talk about this much better than I can. So I think it's also, you need to know your place. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question. There's a question from the audience, Robbie. Let us know, and who's it for?
Yes, so this is a question for Abbe. As Farhan mentioned, we are still in an early phase. We don't know actually where we're going to, right? So how well do you feel prepared for what is coming? And where do you go to for information on this topic?
Yeah, we, as Farhan noted as well, we're starting to shape scenarios of what the future can look like and leveraging the learnings from the experiences that we're having and projecting how we need to evolve. And so clearly we're looking at all the various monitors that I noted earlier to keep track of how things have progressed with the virus, how things have tampered off in certain markets and countries, what have they done to help that happen, and then make sure that we're taking those additional precautions as we think through our plans as to how people will re-enter into the workforce. So we started to build out various scenarios, and we've also shaped a plan for what that re-entry might look like for Ahold Delhaize. And it's definitely sequenced and it's definitely phased based on how people will bring people back to either our support office organizations or headquarters, or how they'll be operating within the DCs, or how they'll be operating within our stores. And clearly, because of some of the learnings that we've had, there are certain things that we're going to want to retain and be able to implement that'll be longer term for us, and hopefully be, and we don't like to call it the new normal because we think that this is going to continue to evolve, but that we will leverage it to help accelerate our strategy and also to accelerate our ways of working.
Okay, thank you. And for Nicolien, there's a question as well. Because you're working with a lot of clients for your business. So do you expect to have a big financial negative impact for your clients as well? And I think you already spoke that a bit about it. And what scenarios are you working on with them to battle this crisis?
Yeah, I think I touched that's indeed the scenario you are in. Are you in the survival mode, or do you see this maybe as an opportunity? It's hard to say, of course, in such a terrible situation, but for some companies it is going well, and you have all the things in between. So it's indeed thinking in scenarios and in what status I am, and for that planning on how could the future look like, and as far as you can predict that, and then make plans for that. So this is not a people issue, right? This is something we work together with our financial experts, our tax and legal experts, and advising our clients together on all the different scenarios there are, and the measures you need to take depending on the stage you're in.
Okay, thank you.
Professor, in lines of the digital acceleration, it's like Farhan mentioned, things are going way faster than they were already going. What effect do you believe this will have on company cultures for the future? Because we hear sounds coming up that people are not coming back to the office, right? Why take the train 5 days a week for an hour when I can work at home fine? What effects do you see on the long term for cultures within companies?
I like what Farhan said, never waste a good crisis. So what you will certainly see in the rather short term is that companies that can be creative together and come up with new visions, new projects will do well. Others that sit and wait might not do so well. So things are going to change fast. I don't expect a systematic effect on company culture. We are now in the middle of this thing. This is actually a minor disease. I mean, I'm a population biologist. You know, it kills elderly and diseased people. We are all very much excited about it, and rightly so. And if you're in a company, this is very, very big. But it's not really a big crisis. We could have a very different kind of pandemic in 10 years. We could have the climate change accelerating even more than it does now, and really have to get away from a number of low-lying places in Europe in the next 50 years. So we're not talking about something really big compared to what I expect that people younger than me will come to live through. So in terms of company culture, I don't think that's a big issue. I think that what's the big issue is actually for companies to be embedded in the fate of humanity as a whole, not just their own company, and to rethink the relationship between private, public, national, and worldwide. And companies have one advantage over countries, which is they are already worldwide. They also have a disadvantage, which is their interest tends to be very narrow and in the hand of shareholders. So whereas the countries have a very wide stakeholdership, all the citizens. So the mix between citizenship of countries that are parochial and sort of how do you say, purely financial interest in the global companies that have a lot of license to produce stock that they do. This mix, I think, in the coming time is going to be accelerating in its poignancy. And I would be very curious to know what you guys who are in the big companies think of this.
Good question, Professor. I'm thinking Abbe has thoughts on this.
Yeah, you know, I like Gert-Jan's comment about taking a more holistic societal view on things, and I think we have to do that as big corporations because different pandemics and different crises will address different organizations differently, meaning some will be winners and some will be losers at different points in time. And I think we have to step back and look at the full ecosystem and as well be in this together. And so you can indicate like some of the vital sector players now are winning, but then how are we helping those that are losing? And how do we make sure that the communities that we're a part of survive and are sustainable? And so where we have growth, we ought to not only be reinvesting that growth to accelerate our own strategies, but at the same time be reinvesting that in the communities to make sure that they're sustainable and remain healthy.
Yeah. Are you satisfied with that answer, Professor?
Yes, for now I certainly am.
All right.
Kind.
Moving on to maybe the last topic of today is the positive note, and we already heard a few positive things coming out of this. But in general, looking at the bigger picture, apart from the tragedy that we do see, that people do experience personally, but also from a business perspective, because there's tons of entrepreneurs that are having a tough time right now. But what are the positive things to take from this situation? Maybe Farhan, what are your first thoughts here?
Yeah, I think I constantly think about it. Okay, look, this is a wake-up call to reflect and think about how complicated we had actually made our life, right? In the last 4 to 6 weeks, been a really good realization that, okay, how simple it can be and can be functional. So like a lot of the activities we're engaged in, how much value do they really add at a bigger level? So it keeps reminding me, okay, if I went and retired in a village but did not have much of a social life, this is what we like, and it'll be pretty calm and good. But the other thing is connected to the topic we're just talking about. if you pay attention to, with all this shutdown, how the Earth has started breathing, and you can see clouds and like skies, and like the climate is changing within month. We should think about the impact. What if we actually had a mandatory shutdown like this every year for a month for the entire world? I think it would be very good for the sustainability health of the planet. And life goes on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Professor, I see you smiling. You're very happy with that remark.
I am. It's like the Ramadan, you know. It's makes everybody think differently about their lives. And I have seen stars here in the Netherlands that I haven't seen for many years in the sky. So it really makes you think about, oh God, what a mess are we making of our lives? How many children are not getting asthmatic complaints now and will actually live that would not have lived? Yeah. We don't see the numbers now, but there are going to be these very positive side effects to this crisis. Also, I really hope that some innovative companies, now you are into e-commerce and that kind of thing, and accelerating that. Other companies will do other things that hopefully bring cleaner technologies to the market faster. I'm hoping for that kind of thing to happen.
Yeah, yeah, great. Another positive note from your side, Professor, or shall we keep it there?
Well, yeah. Very briefly, it reminds me very much of the value of life, and the value of life is in living a good life, not a long life.
Yeah, wow, that's deep. Thank you, Professor. Nicolien, positive note from your side?
Yeah, what I see, what my clients tell me is that they say this is really bringing us together, and people working shoulder to shoulder to really help the company stay alive, and people coming in and say, you know, working in sales, for instance, and usually travel the world, and they can't do their work obviously now, and they just come in and say, you know, what can I do to help you? And they work in shops, or I've seen many examples of people offering their help, and I think that's great to see, especially I think in Europe, where people usually look at their job profile and say, you know, this is not in there, so I'm not going to do that. But now they really, selflessly offer help. That's what I like to see.
Yeah, great. Abbe, your positive words to round it up before we get to the conclusions and takeaways from Rina.
Yeah, I mean, I feel very similarly that, I mean, I hope that this enables people to be very purpose-driven and very value-based, and always do what's right for not only themselves, but also for the organization and for the communities that they're a part of. Because there's a lot of things for our business and our organization that I'm excited about relative to, you know, building new capabilities in and accelerating digital and technology. Also really ensuring a heightened focus on the health and well-being and safety of our associates and customers at all times. And don't get me wrong, Farhan and I will tell you that health and safety have always been a part of our day-to-day job, and no doubt our good business practices. But I think with what we're seeing now, it brings a heightened focus and also a heightened expectations from customers. And I think that's something we clearly want to retain. And also that whole thought of speed and how we take decisions and actions, and really being more myopic in our focus and what we work on and how we prioritize. But we really ought to do it for the benefit of the whole versus just individually, and we should be in it together.
Great, that's beautiful, Abbe. Thanks a lot. And thanks to all of you panelists for joining this webinar today. Yeah, I think we covered a few very interesting topics, and I hope we created relevant content for a lot of people to learn from and to share. So again, thanks for your time. Yeah, we have 2 more minutes, Rina. I'm sorry.
Great.
But I'm sure that you can round it up with the main conclusions and takeaways.
Oh God, I have 1 minute left actually.
Oh, sorry.
So here I start running. So I think thank you very much. It was super interesting, and it went through different subjects throughout the hour. So let me humbly try to summarize. I think first, which Abbe pointed out very well, the first priority is to keep employees and clients stay healthy and safe. And I think you gave some really practical examples. I shop at Albert Heijn every day, so I've seen all the clean and the different interventions that were taken. Also the refreshing policies, right, that you talked about, like sick pay, e-coaching, even going on bike rides while on the phone. Not sure how that works here in the Netherlands, but hey, very great.
Hands-free, hands-free.
Hands-free. Nicolien is going to adapt that.
I will.
Yes, and then I think Nicolien honed in on the different governance measures to ensure that we stay on top of them, and that we all already applied for them, but she also explained some other instruments like postponing payments, questions around what can you actually require from your employees in terms of certain payments, redundancy plans. She talked about upskilling, so taking the opportunity now to upskill talent that you want to keep. You all talked a lot about morale, so the importance to keep up morale and to keep an eye on how people are doing for the sake of the community. Farhan, you talked a lot about the digital tools. You said it's a little bit too early in the cycle to actually talk about a new normal, but it also accelerated both, I think, new interventions and innovations, and maybe even investments that you're making in new tools like AI and talent, very important requirement for that. And then I think at the end, we all felt that we need to take a holistic approach to this. I like this idea that, with COVID-19, people start to have issues with breathing, and at the same time, the earth starts breathing. So there's some signaling probably in that. The value of life is a good life and not a long life. And in the end, let's all work together because we're in this as a community. So it's not like one winner takes all, but we're in this together. So how can we help one another? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Have a great evening and day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys.